Okay, thanks. Hi everyone, thanks for coming. It's the last session, so I guess you are all tired. Today I'm gonna just finish this this day with a 1 hour session on the Java EE Security API. It's a brand new API that is going to be on Java 8. The code name is JSR 375. Who already heard about this JSR? Oh yeah, a couple of you. That's good. So I'm gonna invite one of my friends, Ryan McGuinness, during this talk, and more especially at the end, during the demo. You're gonna share with us some experience about the cloud computing and the security challenges. So first of all, some words about me. My name is Jean-Louis Monteiro. So I work at Tommy Tribe. I have about 10 years experience on Java EE, and I am an open source addict. Not just because I love to spend my evenings working on open source, but also because I can meet a lot of great people, and that's also the reason why I joined also the expert group for the first time with the AGB 3.2, and since the beginning of this year, I just joined as well the Java EE Security API. Yeah, I have 2 wonderful kids. I just missed the birthday of my son yesterday, so happy birthday, Luca. Thanks. Today I'm going to spend some time trying to go through the motivations and why the JCP decided to create a brand new JSR, totally focused on the security. I'm going to try also to, so it's, as I will say a bit later, it's a really brand new JSR. We barely started. So I'm going to try to share with you some of the ideas of the expert group. Also, I'm going to go through some examples that we created on our playground, and hopefully gather some feedback from you all in order to get back to the expert group and take into account as much as possible feedback. Okay, so the idea to create a new JSR came from the Java EE 8 survey. About 5,000 people answered this survey, which is really a very small subset of the Java community, I guess. But it was pretty clear in this survey that the security was really a big concern in Java EE platform, and the JCP had to work on this area. So as you can see on the chart, about a fifth is on the security simplification and security interceptors. I'm going to go into a bit into details. If you want to get all the results of this survey, it's available in the Oracle website or the blog from Linda De Mitchell. Well, some of the questions, I won't go through all of the questions, but some important questions that we are trying to tackle in the expert group. So one of the questions was the ability to support the password aliasing. We don't want anymore to have the passwords in clear in any annotations or any configuration files, so we want to be able to resolve the password at runtime. Add also a couple of cryptography on top of that, so we don't need to have clear passwords anywhere. So about 60% of people say that it was an interesting feature. For those who are familiar with Java EE, basically the only thing we have in Java EE is principle. So there is definitely a need to standardize, some of the important notions like the group, the roles, and make sure that we can define some mapping between the two. So it's also a big part of the answers. JASPIC. So who knows JASPIC? Yeah. So JASPIC came like 6 or 7 years ago. Obviously, it's not a well-known specification. It was supposed to bring some flexibility to the applications to register their own authentication module. But it's way too complex. Like you need to implement like 6 interfaces, something like that, just to register your own authentication module. So, yeah, most people has to simplify that JASPIC specification. So we're gonna try also to tackle this. The next one is also quite linked to this one, which is basically the ability to have a standard configuration, so that when you switch from one container to the other, you can hopefully use the same configuration and have a better portability. And finally, the last one is the expression language. So basically, until now in the Java EE specification, we had only like the roles or load annotation, where you can use only a string, which is a role name. So the goal of this feature request is to being able to support something more flexible, and the expression language is one way to get more flexibility, so that you can implement more complex authorization rules in your business. Well, I also got some feedback from some well-known people, which are part of the community. So one of the aspects that went often as a feedback is that basically Java EE keeps ignoring that people uses the cloud. So and most of the time the security is configured as part of the container, and unfortunately, when you use some cloud deployments, you can't touch the container configuration. So it's really a problem, and we need to tackle this problem. So what's wrong with this Java EE security? So as I mentioned previously, one of the big issues is that it's not portable. It's overly abstract, like the JASPIC example I gave you. So you have to create a lot of interfaces. You only have principals, but you cannot say that this principal is the username or it's a role, so you cannot make any difference between the principals. Not cloud ready. I think today we can't ignore anymore that we have to deploy our applications on the cloud. So we need to be an enabler and allow people to use Java EE security on the cloud. And I must say that nowadays it's a big challenge. By the time we got this JSR, people just went into third-party frameworks, and it's becoming harder and harder to get them back into Java EE. So. Some related specifications, I mentioned some of them. JAS, which is a pretty old specification, like 15 years old specification. It's still widely used today. Jack is more for containers, so I won't spend more time on that. And the JASPIC one, which was at the beginning, in my opinion, a good specification, but ended into something really complex and something that people at the end don't use. So what other choice do we have? So we have two de facto standards, the Spring Security one. Any of you using Spring Security? Yeah, that's the most used. It was previously known as ASEGI when I started looking at it. And well, it's a pretty flexible framework, very powerful. Until recently, it was only an API with no backend. Which makes sense for me because we all know that the security is, most of the time project specific or enterprise specific. So it's really hard usually to create a backend that can fit all the needs. But recently they have added some backends, like in memory backend or a JDBC backend. The other well-known one is Apache Shiro. Any users of Apache Shiro? Yeah, this is really a good one if if you want to spend some time looking at Apache Shiro, the documentation is not always up to date, but the architecture of this project is really nice. And it has some drawbacks compared to Spring Security, but it also has some great benefits. For instance, it's not tied to the servlet specifications, so it has its own session management that you can use on a plain application server, and not especially in servlets, even in Java SE. And you have some high-level cryptography features, which is pretty convenient because the Java cryptography API is quite boring to use and a bit too verbose. And what else? Well, I must say that most of the time I've seen people writing their own. How many people? Yeah, obviously. So yeah, all of us already wrote our own security framework. As I mentioned previously, the main reason is that usually you have to take care of your own, your own company and the history of your company. So it makes sense. So what to do? Well, I think first of all we need to make the current security APIs simple and usable. We need also to modernize the security APIs, as Antoine Sabaudior mentioned during the CDI 2.0 talk. We need to get together and try to see how we can use CDI in the best way to leverage our Java EE security API. And as I mentioned also previously, we plan to heavily use the expression language to make it easier to have your own authorization rules. Developer friendly, yeah, lot of XML as usually in Java EE. It was the case previously. We tend to use more the annotations. We still have a lot of XML pending on the Java EE on the Java security area. So we definitely want to get rid of those painful XML files to write. And as I mentioned also, we want to be cloud ready, which is avoid all the server configuration. So yeah, the JSR 375 is focused on the application development and the security is to use. That's our main driver, and we want to achieve that. We won't probably get it all inside the first version, but we definitely want to start as simple as possible so that we don't add any, something that will become a restriction for the version 1.1 or 1.2. So better to start simple, gather feedback, and then during the next versions continue to add something. So as I mentioned, the expert group is quite new. It started like almost one year ago in last December. The expert group has been built during the first quarter of this year, and we barely started. So basically we started talking together in May or June, and we started putting together some examples on the things we would like to change, and that's where I'm going to spend some time now. Quick tour of the expert group. Not that I want to focus too much on people, but I just want to say that most of those people come from different companies, not only the big, the major companies, but we have also a couple of individuals, which is important for the specification. We have the chance to have a couple of them at Devoxx, so feel free to ask them and to meet them, to ask, to get some answers and to contribute to the project. Well, as I mentioned, we just started the specification, so we have two options. A good opportunity to get it right. If we don't want to have everything inside, I think, and obviously the risk is to get it wrong. Hopefully, you can give us enough feedback so that we can try to finally have something useful. So yeah, the goal of this talk, I'm afraid, but it's not to give you solutions. We don't have them yet. We are looking for what we can do to simplify everything. My goal is to get your feedback and report to the expert group so that we can improve the things. All right, so the main focus for this specification is mainly, as I mentioned, try to modernize and standardize a bit the things. So the first focus is at least to have the same terminology, and so that we can discuss all together and also exchange with the other specifications. We plan to spend some time on the user management, try to see if we can include a simple backend, but something that people could use out of the box without having to implement something. We want something that runs. And obviously, we plan to spend some time on the password aliasing and the other features. In terms of planning, we are currently working on the terminology. We are also working on some authentication mechanisms. I'm going to go through some examples after. We worked on the identity store, and if we have time, we're going to continue through the list and do as much as we can. In terms of terminology, how many of you already use EJBs? Yeah, so for instance, we have some crazy inconsistency, like a user and a caller. So from a servlet point of view, we use users. From an EJB point of view, we use callers. And as I mentioned, we have no group. We only have principals. So it's kind of missing. We have also a lot of security context. So we have the servlet one, where you can find the is user enroll and get user principal, where you can also call login and logout. We have the session context from the EJB world. And now that we have JAX-RS, we have also security context in JAX-RS, where you can also check if, if the user is authenticated, etc. But guess what? We don't have anything for CDI. So we may have at some point to work also with the CDI specification in order to find, canonical security context that we can apply all over the platform. I don't want another security context for CDI, which is also different from the other ones. And we started working on the something where you can store your identities. There are different ways to name it. Some like Tomcat or Apache Shiro name that Realm. Some others use login module and or authentication provider. So that's why we want to work on the terminology so that we all speak the same language. So here is the big picture of what we ended with in terms of terminology. So the security context is in the middle. Then we have the identity store and a couple of other terminology we've decided to integrate into the specification. Okay, so if you have some questions, I can answer some questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go through IntelliJ and try to give you some details about what we started with and some examples. Okay. All right. This is the one we created together. Do you want to give some words, Ryan?
Hello. All right, so thank you, John Louis, for inviting me up here today to talk to you guys. So back in January, I contacted David Blevins, and he quickly put me in contact with Jean-Louis and said, talk to him. He's doing this right now. And the problem that I came to David with was, man, I'm deploying Tomcat and I'm deploying Tommy into a cloud environment, and I need to be able to configure it dynamically because I can't have people writing context XML files, creating very complex builds, moving everything through the system. So one of the goals that I'd come to him with is we need to make this easier. And of course, again, Jean-Louis types to me over Google Chat, and he and I start coding. So that was January 7th. About the evening of January 7th, we actually had a solution that he'd already been working on in Tommy called the Lazy Realm. So what the Lazy Realm allowed us to do is inject an authenticator and an authorizer via CDI. And this is where we're going to actually talk now.
Yep.
With this example that we had gone through together. And we had some follow-up dialogue on things on how we can actually work with this together. So Tommy and Tomcat are fundamental to our success. They are one of the things that we build on, but from a cloud container, they must be configurable at runtime. So one thing that I would say that is very, very important if you didn't hear it is we need your help in the security realm identification. We all have problems there. So the sooner people get involved with this, the more malleable it is right now, the further it gets along, the more solidified it will be, the harder it will be to change. We need your 2 cents worth. So if everyone in here did what we did, what everyone did, and created your own, we all have the same problems. We all have the same pain points. And I think that's where we can come together in this particular JSR and fix it. Otherwise, these guys right now are standing at the base of a very tall mountain saying we want to change the way things have been done for 20 years. So all the help you can get, and we'll be here, of course, with you along the way. So thank you for inviting me up to speak.
Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, the idea of this example is to go a bit further. So the first step was to enable CDI at the security level. The next idea was to avoid the realm, the Tomcat realm-like interface where you cannot add any other method, which you have to implement all methods even if you only use one. So the idea was to use the CDI events, which is a pretty convenient way to achieve that goal, where we basically defined a set of events depending on what are your credentials. So in this example, the credentials are only the user password, but the idea behind this events mechanism is that you could use like an O2 token, you can use like an X509 certificate to authenticate, but you only have to implement what you need, and you can do that in your application. You don't have to do that and push half of your application in the application server, because that's usually the case. So the idea was that at the critical steps of the authentication, the application server will fire a couple of CDI events, and you can just observe them into your application and do your authentication based on your backend. So, for instance, if you have, a JPA model, you don't have to package all your JPA model and push everything into your container. You can keep and control everything into your web app. So this authentication, this observer is pretty trivial and almost useless, but that gives you at least a view about what we can do. So this is the authentication part. We have also the login phase where you can use the HTTP request to authenticate. And obviously we have a servlet with some security constraints. So it uses the annotations instead of the web XML file, but the result is the same. To access this servlet, I need to have the admin role. All that works around what we have called a CDI event realm which is the link between the application server and your web app using CDI. And that obviously runs, and I'm going to remove that. Here I go. So I've just tested that with an Archelian test, so well, I can run that, but doesn't make a lot of added value. So yeah, the idea is really to make use as much as possible the technologies we have today, and CDI is obviously one of them. Okay, let me move that. So in terms of playground, I forgot to mention that we have a GitHub repository that you can visit. If I can move that to the other screen, maybe not. So anyway, we have a GitHub repo where you can find all the examples I'm going to go through today, or maybe not all of them, but you can definitely contribute your own example, or at least submit your ideas or create issues. Well, I have a couple of examples. Here I go. So this CDI one is the one we have seen with Tommy, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to go through it again. Yeah, there is one thing also we want to fix in the specifications. So we also keep forgetting that HTTP is a rule today and nowadays, and REST is also the rule, and not having the ability to basically apply the servlet and HTTP constraints on a JAX-RS endpoint. It's really painful. So one of our wish is to being able to use the servlet annotations on your regular REST endpoints, so that you can enforce the security without having to use the security context and do that programmatically. We have also, which one I'm going to grab? This one is quite obvious. I mentioned that previously. So in Java, by default, we only have the principal. So one of the little change we would like to do is basically create subclasses of that principal, so that when you receive a list of principals, you can make the difference between the username and the roles or something else. So we're going to call that color principal or user principal. Again, it depends on what we're going to end with in terms of trying to align between the EJB specification and the servlet specification. So if we go through the servlet specification path, then it's going to be probably a user principal. If we stick with the EJB specification, it's going to be probably color principal, but that doesn't mind. And obviously, we plan to also create a group principal, as I mentioned, so that you can just put all your groups inside and be able to differentiate. Here we go. So, as I mentioned, we want to also try to find a canonical version of the security context, avoid having different names, different objects, different ways to test if the user is authenticated or not. So we plan to get together with the other specifications, and here is one of the proposals we ended with, which is this simple security context, with at least a login method, a logout method, and a couple of additional, helper methods to make sure that we can get all the roles and get the name of the user. Here I go. So another idea that came from Reza is to being able, from the container point of view, to also use CDI events to notify the application that the user just has been authenticated. or there is an authorization request. So the events we've seen previously are used to authenticate the user. We plan to also extend that to notify the application so that the application can track the current users connected or can do whatever he wants to. So we are thinking about a couple of also events on that path. So this is the way, another way to authenticate, which is a bit different to the one we have seen and the path we followed together. So the goal here is to fire a generic event which is on authentication, and then to have some kind of binding between the credentials of the user in order to find the right method. So that's another path. We are thinking about that, and probably yeah, we're gonna have to discuss and find the path we want to follow. That one is quite interesting because that's allows you to basically build at runtime the set of roles you want to give to your user. Usually, as soon as you authenticate, the set of roles are statically returned, but with that approach, you may have to, you have the ability to return a different set of roles for the user. Oops. Okay, so some of you already used the Jazz login module. So we went into also this login module issue. So it's really like painful to implement a login module because it's too abstract. So you basically get a subject and maps, and then you have to do it yourself. So we plan to give people more strongly typed interfaces and give them the ability to implement that on their own application instead on the application server. So here is, for instance, an interface for the password login module. Again, today O2 is, is a de facto standard for tokens. So we need also to be able to support tokens like the O2 tokens, and being able to also support more complex flows because we don't always receive the user credentials. Sometimes we may have to talk to an identity provider in order to authenticate. So we may have to support some more complex flows, and that's what we want to do with those login modules as well. This one is interesting because it comes from the Delta Spike community. So it's a bit more low level, but you have to choose your way. If you want to have a lot of flexibility, usually you have to go more low level, and that's the path the Delta Spike guys went to. So they basically have a binding and a secure annotation, and then they can use that in order to secure their resources. So it can be like JSF resources in this example, but it could be also any other CDI bin or any other servlet or whatever. And then obviously we will have to implement an interceptor-like class that does the job. This one is annotated with secured, and it receives an invocation context. And then you can do your job, which is retrieve the permission required annotation, go through the values, which is the list of the roles required, and then you can implement your own logic to make sure that the user that is currently logged in has at least one of them or all of them if you want to. That's also something which is missing in the specification. So for those who are familiar with the roles load, as soon as you have one of the roles, you can just it's fine, I would say, but we don't have any way to say the user needs to have all those roles in order to be able to execute the method. So that's also something we would like to add, because it's been a request that's been done a couple of times. So we want also to be able to say, okay, you need to be admin and something else in order to execute this method. I want to have the expression language one. Here I go. So, well, the name is probably not the best name we could find for that, but never mind. Yeah, the goal is, as I mentioned, to being able to have more complex authorization rules. This is a proposal from Reza, which is obviously very interesting, and which is something that has been asked a couple of times as well. So, it's pretty obvious. You can just define your own expression language, put that into an annotation, and then leave the container evaluate the expression language, and make sure that you can access or not. If you can access, then if you can execute, then you can go into the method. If you can't, then you get back with an error. What else do I have? Yeah, we started, so those were the simple examples. We started thinking about a backend. So Arjun has been one of the, the biggest contributor to this backend. He did like a very complete proposal. We are working and discussing on top of this proposal to make sure that, again, we don't want to add something or any abstraction that will become a restriction tomorrow. So if we have to put that or to postpone the backend, we're gonna do that if that allows us to grab some feedback. If we think that we are ready to go with a simple implementation that all containers will have to support, then we'll do it, because at least you have, in all the containers, you have a ready to run security backend. So as you can see, I won't go into details into this identity store. You can, again, go into our playground and go through all the examples, and also contribute your own backend and do some comments. There is nothing really sexy inside. Basically, we need to have the ability to retrieve a user, or caller, depending on the terminology, check if it exists, and blah, 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 gather all the groups, the roles, also delete a user, add a user, some basic operations so that at least you can add your own users, delete your users, and do a couple of basic operations on top of them. That's the one I wanted to go through Jaspic, because for those who work with Jaspic, so yeah, with Jaspic you basically need to write, as far as I can recall, you need to implement 6 interfaces in order to register your own authentication module. So we are thinking about adding some kind of helper classes, the HTTP message context class, and the abstract HTTP server authentication methods module. The goal of that is to make it really easier to implement your own authentication module and to register that module into the server without any need to package everything into the server or have any external configuration file. So we have a couple of boilerplate into this class, as you can see, so that you don't need to implement everything yourself. And the goal is to just focus, maybe decrease a bit, if that's still readable. Yeah, here I go. So the goal is to make it simple for the users to implement their own authentication mechanism. Again, the goal is to have something flexible so that you can use O2 tokens if you want to. You can use HTTP signatures or whatever. But the goal is basically to implement your own authentication module very quickly and to get the container to use it. Well, the other ones are probably not that interesting for today. Well, I think I'm gonna stop here because I would like to take time to discuss. We have almost 20 minutes left, but I really would like to get back to the expert group with some feedback. So I don't want to go through all the examples if at the end we don't have any time left for the questions. So I'd rather stop here. Maybe I have a couple of other polls in my slides, so we can discuss together. Any questions or anything you want to see or in the specification or any proposals? No, I have a couple of polls, I guess. Yeah, so first off, the security page is the playground GitHub project. So again, go ahead and push your own pull request, your own examples. We're happy to get that into the specification, or at least to get that discussed. So I have a couple of polls, but it doesn't make really a lot of... Any questions? No questions? Okay, thank you very much then.